Well, the RNLI is a volunteer-based institution that is there to save lives at sea. Very simply, that's the job. Is people on a daily basis end up in peril on the sea, and the RNLI are there to pick up the pieces and to save lives, and they do a fantastic job at that. My name's Ben Ainslie. I'm probably best known as a sailor. I've been very fortunate to have a quite diverse career in sailing. Started off with Olympic sailing and then progressing through to the America's Cup and most lastly a competition called Sail GP. We're here in the headquarters for Ineos Britannia, which is our British America's Cup team. We're in Brackley in Northamptonshire, which is also the headquarters for the Mercedes Formula One team. And the reason for that is that Mercedes have come on board. They're a technical partner for our Ineos Britannia campaign. Well, sailing is obviously one of those sports that is totally dependent on the weather, really. Whether you're racing or you're cruising or you're just messing around in the harbour, still things can change very, very quickly, as we know with the weather, and that's what so often catches people out, whether they be amateurs or professionals. Certainly I've had plenty of incidents myself where the RNLI have thankfully come to my rescue and my team's rescue. But yes, the conditions change very quickly, and that is what makes serene and peaceful situations suddenly becomes extremely dangerous, and it happens fast. You know, that's where you really need top support, professional support to help you out in those moments when things are unravelling fast. Well, there are numerous occasions when the RNLI have really got me out of a lot of trouble. I'm trying to think back to a few. Well, I mean, first time was I was only 6-7 years old. I was with my family. We had a small cruising boat down in the West Country in Falmouth, and we had a lobster pot caught on the rudder of this boat, which meant we couldn't steer the boat, and we ended up going onto the rocks. And beautiful, my dad's pride and joy, and this beautiful classic yacht got smashed up onto the rocks, and the RNLI came around from Falmouth lifeboat came around and helped us out massively, and I got the boat off the rocks, but unfortunately it sank. So it wasn't a particularly happy ending, but everyone was safe at least. So that was my first interaction with the RNLI, and there have been many since. I'm trying to think of another one. Probably another good one was in Hayling Island inshore lifeboat, rescued my very good friend and fellow Olympian Ian Percy and myself. We were sailing a boat called a Laser 5000. We managed to capsize this thing on Hayling sandbar with very, very shallow water all of a sudden, broke the mast, ripped the mast out of the boat, and we're pretty much stranded. And so the inshore lifeboat came out and rescued us, and much to huge embarrassment towed us in front of the sailing club, which big event had probably had a couple of hundred people stood on the balcony of the sailing club clapping as we were towed past the club by the RNLI. So I think the RNLI boys were very proud, but we were slightly embarrassed. I think this sort of never give up attitude or resilience, I think it's important in any walk of life, but certainly when it comes to being in challenging conditions at sea, which of course the RNLI are, on a daily basis, you need to have a bit of grit and determination to come through some of those challenges. And that's, I suppose, one of the reasons why I've always been keen to support the RNLI. I've been very fortunate to have received their support on many occasions, but also just sharing some of those challenges and knowing just how difficult it can be for the teams out there in some of these situations. Of course, it feels natural that you want to do everything you can to support the RNLI and the teams out there across the country and around the world, helping when they can. Well, it was 20 odd years ago I laid the foundations for the college down in Poole, and time has flown, but to think of thousands of youngsters, of people coming through, getting the experience needed to go on and really contribute massively to the RNLI as an organisation, and for the organisation to have grown as it has done and have saved so many countless lives. Anyone who's had anything to do with the RNLI is just extremely proud of it as an organisation. So one of my favourite interactions with the RNLI was actually for the Bembridge lifeboat, and it wasn't long after the America's Cup we'd done in 2017. Myself and a few team members, we went down to the lifeboat station, were given a fantastic tour, and then went onto the lifeboat itself and got launched down the ramp as well, was effectively any way to launch that lifeboat. It's quite a sort of precarious spot, the Bembridge lifeboat. That was a real thrill. And then we motored around to the local sailing club and did a session with the young sailors down there, talking about all sorts of different experiences. Like I said, just come back from the America's Cup, so we talked about that. We talked about youngsters getting into the sport of sailing, and also talked about the great work that the RNLI do and safety at sea, and that being an important thing for youngsters to learn those invaluable skills about just how to operate on the water in a safe manner. So yeah, it was a great day out. So next year is a very big year for the RNLI, of course, and also for our team in the America's Cup. So we'll race the 37th edition of the America's Cup down in Barcelona, starting in the end of August and running through to mid-October. Britain has, believe it or not, never won the America's Cup. It's the oldest international sporting trophy, and it started around the Isle of Wight in 1851. So that's our motivation, really, for everyone in the team, is to bring it back to where it started and for the first time to win the America's Cup. The America's Cup in particular is just a massive team sport. If ever there was a example of an organisation, a technical organisation, having to come together, it really is that. And I suppose it does share a lot of similarities with Formula One in that respect, that we have 200 people in our organisation, and every single one of those people will contribute in one way or another to the performance of the boat and the outcome, the overall outcome. Are we successful or not? When that goes well, it's hugely rewarding. I've been fortunate to have had some successes at Olympic level as an individual sports person, and that, don't get me wrong, those were amazing memories, and you sort of pat yourself on the back. But when you actually achieve something with a great group of people that you've all dug in together and really gone through some hard yards to make it come together to get that ultimate performance, that's incredibly rewarding, much more rewarding than anything you'll do as an individual. So that's really why we do it. That said, we inevitably go through some tough times as well. And, that's, in my experience, that's when you really find out if you've got a strong team, if you've got a good team. And, coming back to the RNLI, the RNLI is facing adversity on a daily basis. And that's why you have to have such a strong team across the board, not just the team going out on the boats, but the everyone involved, from the maintenance of the boats to the fundraising to the management of the organisation, all coming together to give the team out on the water the support they need to do their job. So it's fantastic to see. I grew up in Cornwall, and I remember as a kid, you'd go to one of the local pubs down there and they'd have, of course, a history of the RNLI, and that's largely, where many of the shipwrecks were, 150, 200 years ago. And a huge amount of respect for the RNLI. So that's sort of been ingrained in me, really, I suppose, since childhood. And, to see where the RNLI started and how it's developed and how the technology has developed, such a stark contrast between the rowing gigs that they started out in a couple hundred years ago to the amazing craft that the teams are able to take to the water in now. And the organisation has also had to develop and has done a fantastic job of that, in not just on the water but off the water as well. And we talked about the college and pool and training the new recruits and upskilling across the board. So it's been brilliant to see the development of the RNLI in those 200 years. and it's an institution which the whole country are immensely proud of. You know, you speak to anyone about the RNLI. My daughter's 7 years old, and she is probably the biggest fan of saving lives at sea. So people just love it. I think they're just drawn to it. They understand the danger, the amazing work that the RNLI does, and are just so proud of that and willing to support in any way they can.
Hi, I'm Danielle Obi, Chair and Co-founder of the Black Swimming Association, BSA, a strategic partner of the RNLI. You've been listening to the RNLI's 200 Voices collection. To hear more remarkable stories, head to rnli.org/200voices or subscribe to RNLI, wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening.
"200 Voices" is an adventurous audio limited production for the RNLI.
My name is Pip Hare, and I am the 8th woman in the world to ever finish the Vendée Globe race, which is a single-handed, non-stop round-the-world sailing race. The Vendée Globe race is kind of like any of the major sporting events. It happens every 4 years, and it is the toughest solo ocean race on the planet. It is one of the few sporting events where men and women compete on equal terms. And that's because the boats are so big and so powerful that your physical ability takes a backseat to your mental strategy and problem solving. I first read about the Vendée Globe race when I was 17 years old, and I finally got to cross the start line when I was 46. It was the best 3 months of my life, without a doubt. I pushed myself in a way I didn't know was possible. I stepped up to every challenge in a version of myself that I was super proud of, because I was resourceful, I was brave, I was resilient, I never stopped believing I could do better. But also just having the permission to only be a sailor for 3 months of my life was just extraordinary, and I loved every minute of it. So I guess the first thing to know is that even though the boat is 60 foot long, there's nothing inside it. This is an out-and-out race machine. So it's built of carbon. Some places it's solid carbon, some places it's carbon with either a foam or an aluminium sandwich in between. So there's no furniture, no beds, no seats, no doors, no rooms. So you kind of just live on the inside of a bare hull. Over a 24-hour period, there is so much to do. There's too much to do. No one is allowed to help me with tactics or navigation. So I need to download weather forecasts, satellite images via satellites, and then use computer software to find the best route around weather systems, to stay in the wind but out of danger, to try and outsmart my competitors. So there's a constant wear and tear on your body. The noise is incredible. The boat howls and hums, and you can feel every single wave that slaps the hull. You can hear the sound of the water. It's very, very loud. And because the boat's going so fast, I can't sleep for long periods of time. So my average sleep would be about 30 minutes at a time, and that would be on a beanbag on the floor. But sometimes it's just not like that. Sometimes the boat needs my attention. I need to keep making changes. I need to keep looking out for other competitors, or something breaks and I have to fix it. And in those cases, I might go for kind of 24 hours without sleeping. And then, of course, I need to eat. So I eat freeze-dried food, which is all pre-packed for me before the race. I need to drink. I don't do a lot of washing. And the toilet is a bucket. It's an interesting race because, well, actually any endurance sport event transitions this balance between physical ability and mental strength. And I think the Vendée Globe is the epitome of that, because it goes on for 3 months. From the minute you cross that start line, your boat, and actually to a certain extent your body, is falling apart. It's almost like you stand up, you get knocked down, you stand up, you get knocked down. I had to climb the mast twice during the race, and so that is absolutely terrifying. I don't think that any of my competitors would put their hands up and say they like climbing the mast. And if I just kind of frame it for those that might not be able to imagine, it's the mast is 30 metres high, and you have to climb it while the boat is still sailing. At the times I did it, I was over 1,000 miles offshore. And when you climb the mast, you are just on a piece of rope. You hoist a piece of rope to the top of the mast, which is a proper climbing rope. You wear a climbing device, which is similar to what tree surgeons use, so that you can self-belay, which most importantly is about letting yourself down again. And you just have to climb. And the worry is, I mean, there is a lot of worries. So one is that the autopilot might fail and the boat might career off in another direction, sails crashing around all over the place, and you'd be at the top of the mast and you couldn't do anything about it. The weather might change, the boat suddenly might be overpowered and heel right over, and again you wouldn't be able to do anything. Obviously there's massive fear of falling. So we're here based in Poole, same place as the RNLI HQ, and I've created an ocean racing team here, which I'm quite proud of. Yeah, the 79 Fastnet, I think, actually changed offshore sailing everywhere, because there was such an unnecessary loss of life, not just from the sailors, but also sadly from rescuers as well. And after that, there was a big review around what safety on these races should look like. And a number of things have happened and still evolve since then. So only boats with a certain righting moment, only boats of a certain length with watertight bulkheads are allowed to enter offshore races. They specify the safety equipment that must be on board, the kind of life jackets that all competitors must be wearing. We started to take a lot more consideration for forecasting and weather forecasts. I mean, the problem in 79 was that weather forecasting was not so great. They were too far offshore to hear the Coast Guard or to pick up any radio. I was lucky enough to be on the team that originally set up the Swim Safe programme, working with Swim England. So Swim Safe was a programme kind of designed to address the fact that many young families that come down to the coast for kind of the day or a holiday, they're bringing children and young people into a new environment. And even if those young people are able to swim, going into the sea is a completely different experience, and they're not always going to lifeguarded beaches. And so we set up a programme where in coastal locations, swimming teachers were delivering 1 hour free sessions to young people to give them the skills to survive in open water. So it's things like teaching them about temperature, teaching them how to call for help, who to call for help, and of course the float to live message as well. You know, within 2 years we already had case studies of young people who had said they'd used those skills to stay alive in difficult circumstances. And when I look at how the scheme developed, I'm super proud to have been a part of it. I would never go to sea in a boat that I didn't trust. You know, I have to go out and face, you know, huge conditions. And it is frightening, you know, to be a human being in amongst all of that aggressive power of nature is absolutely terrifying, because you know that those elements outside, you could not survive in them at all. But the minute you step into a boat that you have confidence in, you're giving that fear permission to turn off. You're able to focus on the job in hand, because you don't have to think about whether the boat is suitable. But, you know, the other thing for me is that, and I think that there is a synergy there as well with lifeboat crews, but for me, I also have to trust that my team have prepared the boat to the best level possible and maintained it to the best level possible. That when I press a button, something will happen. That when I look into one of my spare bags, the tools I need to fix something will be there. And so although I'm solo sailing, I am working as part of a team, and I have to trust that my team also have the same end goal as I do. And I think, you know, whether your team is on the shore or in the boat, it's that collective drive towards the common goal. And, you know, for the RNLI volunteer crews, that's saving lives. You know, they have a collective goal, they're all working towards it. Every single thing that has been done around them, the building the boat, the maintaining the boat, the training that goes on, the maintenance of the engines, the skills of everybody on board, that's all to a collective purpose of saving lives. In the world of ocean racing has, you know, for all of eternity been massively male dominated, and we as a team are different. There are 6 female skippers in the next Vendée, and I think it's really important that we are on that stage demonstrating what we can do as athletes on equal terms, and normalising having female elite ocean racing sailors, so that women in the future feel they belong in the sport. Other than my 3-year stint at the RNLI, I've been a professional sailor my whole life. And in the early 90s, there just were no female role models for me. When I turned up down on the Solent on the south coast of the UK, I would regularly turn up to kind of mass briefings for skippers, and I would be the only woman there. I didn't go to a sailing club when I was a kid. I didn't have any of that background, so I was quite an outsider from the beginning, and I did find it really hard to find a place where I belonged. And maybe that's why solo sailing appealed so much, because I only needed to belong to the ocean. I didn't need to belong to any other tribe. But things are really changing, and I'm happy to see it changing. The incredible thing about sailing bigger boats where a crew is required is that there is a massively diverse range of skills and abilities required to make a boat go fast. And it's not just about either being heavy or being strong. You don't always have to go to someone who looks the same to find those skills. I'm the only female CEO of an ocean race team in the UK, I also have a female operations director. I'm a female skipper. It's not just about women, and it's not just about young women. It's about a diversity of age, a diversity of ethnicity, a diversity of backgrounds. You know, sailing is a sport that can provide so much to so many people, and there are so many different disciplines of sailing. And I would just love more people to feel like it's a sport where they could belong. The ocean is a place where everyone belongs. The RNLI crews need that diversity of talent and skill. And you might walk up to your local lifeboat station and see kind of a wall of male crew, but you don't have to be like them to be valuable. You don't have to look like them to be valuable. You know, believe in the skills that you have and the attributes you have. Believe in what you can offer, because you really do belong. And ultimately, I know the sea doesn't care. The sea does not care what you look like. In a way, I kind of feel, oh, is it only 200 years? Because the RNLI has always been there. Everyone in some way has seen one of those orange boats. You know, we take it so for granted. And there is just this incredible confidence and trust that when we go out on the water, there are going to be skilled people who will be there if we need them. It's an organisation that has grown with time and adapted to the times that we're in an incredible way. And I guess I just kind of want to say happy anniversary and thank you to all of the incredible volunteer crews. Just thank you for being there.
Hello there, it's Phil Coulter here. You've been listening to part of the RNLI's 200 Voices collection. And to hear more remarkable stories, head to rnli.org/200 Voices or subscribe to the RNLI wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you.
200 Voices is produced for the RNLI by Adventurous Audio Limited.
Hello, this is Griff Rhys-Jones. The RNLI is something absolutely vital to anybody who uses the water. It's interesting to try and work it out, really, how old I must have been. But since my sister, who was only sort of 18 months younger than me, if that, I mean, she was still being, you know, trundled around in a pram, and then my dad stuck me in the the Enterprise dinghy that he'd made in a sort of roof space at the hospital where he worked, and which was a heavy old thing. And but my brother and I used to sit there in these huge Kapok sort of life jackets, you know, which held us like this, just waiting endlessly while there was a sort of like that with the sails going, and finally my mother and father, in a fretful state, would sort of push the boat into the water, and then my mother would be deputed to go off with my sister and meet us in West Wittering. And then, so I was always involved in sailing and being on the water, and all the principles of instruction that come with that. And my dad went on from boat to boat to boat. We moved to East Anglia, which was even more waterlogged, and then I put it behind me. I got to adult life, and I found that I didn't need to own a boat. I could rent one, and that was great. And so every now and again I'd jump on a boat and go sailing still. still feeling sailing in my blood. In fact, I moved here where we are now in the days when East Anglia was sort of remote. I had a little boat here, and when my children were very small, I'd do the same to them, because that's the way it is, as various poets and philosophers have noted, that we just hand these things down. So my children were then made to get into my little boat, and when the tide was up in the creek just at the bottom of the garden, we'd sail across the estuary because the tide was in. This is a very muddy area of the world, but the tide was in. There was a sort of semi-beach over there we could go for a swim. And then we had to hurry back because there's no water in the estuary, and we had to sort of find our way back to our little sort of berth before the water all flooded out. And then one day I bought a slightly bigger boat, a Drascombe lugger, and instead of just crossing over the estuary, I said, we're going on an adventure. You know, we're not going to come back in with the tide. What we're going to do is go on down the river as far as Harwich to Shotley, where there's a marina. And you have to lock in to the Shotley marina. I had the two kids in the boat, and the man came out to do the lock and lock us in. And we're coming in this quite a small Drascombe lugger. He looked down at me, and I said, we've come from Holbrook. And he said, what, you mean just the next village along? And I said, that's right. Most of the people in that marina had come across from Holland. But anyway, he was impressed, we were impressed. But that sort of sense of adventure in boats has always been in my blood, yeah. I must have been aware of various interesting sort of, I mean, if you're around in the coastal regions, you know, you're aware of exciting sort of launch pads for lifeboats, you know, and lifeboats. And I have been, and goodness knows when this was, I've been in West Mersey when the maroon went up. The signal went up, there was a big bang, and suddenly people are rushing down and getting into the boat. We were there very early in the season, it would have been about April. And what was notable about that was that somebody had gone out in a dinghy and it had been very, very cold. They capsized, and they had to get the lifeboat out to get them back, which they did in West Mersey. And then my father was recruited to help this guy who would virtually drowned, because he was a chest physician, so he was a doctor. All I remember is my father tying this guy, got a ladder. He organised a ladder to come and turned him upside down, tied to the ladder so they could drain his lungs and gave him artificial respiration and saved his life. So it was a rather bizarre thing to see your dad suddenly in action like this, sort of triage, you know, sort of there he was doing it all. And but also the lifeboat. And I've had associations since then with West Mersey, because my brother lived in West Mersey. That's where my dad was a member of the club there and everything. And that's where we used to be on that hard, and that's where I used to spend my winters, winter weekends, under a wooden boat, scraping barnacles off it. So for those of you who think that just all people with yachts, you know, spend their time drinking gin and tonics, that's not exactly what it was. My dad kept his boat there, and they asked me back a few years ago to launch a new rib there, which I went down to do. And I joined the crew, and we just went out to take the boat, you know, a fast rib, around the harbour a bit, and then bring it back. And I think the thing that everybody sort of needs to be aware of, really, is that this is a service which is entirely funded by voluntary contribution. And volunteers who do the work as well. And it's really, really vitally important that we support it, especially if we sail in these waters, that we need to do what we can to not pass that box by. I haven't done enough recently, but I love passages with good friends. I haven't done enough of those, really. I've been too busy, so I tend to sort of pick up sailing when something's arrived, and I got a racing bug, so I spend a lot of time racing now. And racing, we just, because we got heavy boats, we spend our time, hoping that the wind picks up and it becomes just windier. Which it is odd, because actually, I think Libby Purvis, who also has long experience boats, knows that there's always a nagging feeling about the sea. If you've sailed a lot and done some quite long passages, you know that things can get, demanding, let's put it that way. I sailed from once, it was October, and we needed to deliver the boat to Copenhagen, and the boat was in Göteborg, because we'd sailed all the way to St. Petersburg and then come back through the we'd left it in Göteborg, and I needed to get another gap. I got a gap, and this was a sort of old 45-foot leaky wooden boat. And we set off in the last of the light, really. That was just the timing of it, and sailed through the night. It was a 24-hour sort of journey down. And it's an odd feeling. It's not just respect. It really is quite just how, let's hope this is manageable. Because as the night goes on, and we're sailing with 3 other guys who are helping me do it, and they'd all told me that they were experienced sailors, but they got very ill. That we hit pretty bad weather. You could say, you're mad, go in. You can't go in. There's nowhere that's you're better off just keeping going through the night. But then when you're standing next to people and you can see that they've gradually become very ill as a result of being on the boat, seasick, you know that you're the one who's essentially going to have to sail this boat through those conditions and through most of the night. And if you get down below, you're going to be called up again pretty quick just to control the boat and get it, which you do. It's a lesson in preparation and knowing exactly what you're doing. It wasn't their fault that they got ill, but you know what I mean? It sort of like suddenly puts a lot more responsibility on you. So we make the passage, and by the next day the wind's died, luckily, and we make our way into Copenhagen. And you do think, oh God, thank goodness, we're here. But also you've had one of the most extraordinary experiences of your life. And luckily everything in the boat was sound and held and was good. But I know from the things I've been through that the things I went through were mild. I've never been in a force 10, 12. I've been in sort of force 8, force 9, I've been out there, but I've never been in the real extremes when the sea becomes a place of frenzy, the noise. That's the thing. I would find it, and once you've been in it, it becomes exhausting and slightly terrifying. Just the extremes of the way that the weather suddenly comes and sits on you and just blows and blows and blows and blows and blows. So I don't envy people in any way when they have to go out in real storms and attend to people. So although what the service that's provided by the RNLI has leapt exponentially from the Grace Darling sort of days of jumping in a rowing boat and rowing out to help somebody, to amazing craft, fantastic safety operations, real brilliance, coordination with the Coast Guard, and that, it is still, in essence, the Grace Darling model. It happens because there are people in coastal regions who care enough to volunteer to serve, and there are enough people to give money to support them. So it's like an emergency service, like the ambulance or the police or the fire service, but it's paid for by us and needs our support.
Hello, it's Dee Kafari here, and you've been listening to part of the RNLI's 200 Voices collection. To hear more remarkable stories, head to rnli.org/200 voices or subscribe to the RNLI, wherever you get your podcast from. Thank you.
"200 Voices" is an adventurous audio limited production for the RNLI.
I'm Helen Glover. I'm a Cornish girl and an Olympic rower. I first fell in love with water from the moment I can remember. My earliest memories involve water in every way, in the smell, the sound. I remember being little and going on big walks with my family on the cliff tops in Cornwall and seeing the waves crashing. And I remember, swimming in the sea and feeling thrown around by the waves. And I always felt lucky. I know sometimes you look back and you realise there are moments in your childhood you took for granted and never really realised how lucky you were. But I always felt so lucky living close to the sea. The RNLI, I think, just always has a place in the community as such a strong constant. And I was very aware from an early age of the importance that it played in the community, but mainly from the more obvious things. I remember going down to the harbour wall and watching the practices, and on fish festival days in Newlyn there would be a big open day where you could go and look around the lifeboats and things like that. So I remember kind of feeling in quite close contact to them. Like you can touch the boats, you can see them, you can look out into the harbour and see people practicing. So I think they're like this big constant presence, I think, in a town like Penzance and Newlyn where I grew up. The Penley lifeboat disaster, I feel like, is something we grew up with, in a sense of the names of the people lost in the disaster were so familiar in the language that we used, and the faces I remember seeing photos of, and in school it was just, these are the names that you could almost reel off the tongue. It was in 1981 and in the lead up to Christmas, and there was a boat just off the coast of Cornwall that got into trouble. The Penley lifeboat was launched, and by all accounts it was launched in weather that almost seemed impossible to get the boat off the slipway with. It was such a raging storm, and unfortunately all of the crew, the Penley lifeboat, were lost that night, as well as the crew that they were trying to rescue. And it goes down in the history books, I think, as one of the most heroic acts that has been seen, but also one of the saddest, because such a huge proportion of the local people were on that lifeboat and were brothers, fathers, sons of everybody in the community. So it was you couldn't think of something much more impactful, I think, and especially in the run up to Christmas, it's just a really poignant time, I think, as well. For me, it was really important when it came up to the 40th anniversary. It was important to mark it, and also to keep those names in the minds of people, not just because we remember those we lost, and that's really important, but also that we look forward to saying, this is why it's so important to keep this going. This is the legacy we've got to maintain. So, yeah, I think for me, partly because I grew up knowing the names of those men and knowing the families, and still knowing some of the families that were left behind. But as we go further from the disaster, I think it's really important to just remember that this is not a run-of-the-mill job. It's not something people do lightly, and there's a lot of history behind it as well. Lots of people ask me about my favourite moments from London 2012, and lots of them did exist up in London and in the big city, but for me, the moment I came home was probably the most special. And Penley Lifeboat had been in touch in the run-up to this open bus top parade that went through Penzance, and still seems like the most ridiculous thing that's ever happened to me. But the way we started the parade was I was picked up on the lifeboat and ended up driving it all the way around past New Lynn and through to Mousehole, and got dropped off to start my bus tour there by the lifeboat. And so I just think, I mean, I don't think anyone has had such a cool entrance to a bus parade in their lives. I'm definitely taking that one. I think that the crews of the RNLI, I admire just what they're willing to give to their communities, knowing every day what the potential risk is. And I just think that they're such community-driven, open-hearted people. Every single person I've met on the lifeboats at the RNLI is just somebody that you want as a friend, somebody you would like to have your back, somebody really trustworthy. And then within the wider RNLI, people who are there manning the lifeboat stations or raising money or doing everything behind the scenes to make the RNLI work and be every cog in the machine. It's relentless. It really is relentless to kind of keep the money coming in. But I think the thing that keeps it going is this money is saving lives, and it's saving lives every single year. And so, yeah, every single person, from the people on the lifeboats to the people off it, I think are just an amazing part of a incredible team.
Hello, this is Griff Rhys-Jones. You've been listening to the RNLI's 200 Voices collection. To hear more remarkable stories, head to rnli.org/200voices or subscribe to RNLI wherever you get your podcasts from. Thank you for listening.
"200 Voices" is an adventurous audio limited production for the RNLI.
My name's Jim Moir. I'm a painter and an actor, and I did some fundraising art piece for the RNLI, who I see off the coast of Deal most days. I went to art school in the 80s, and I left art school and did a kind of performance piece, which was on a stage where I kind of did what I thought comedians would do, what a comedian would do. So I did change my name. I just picked a name so I called myself Vic Reeves for this particular piece, and I was playing a sort of northern, I suppose, a compare, but I'd never seen any comedy, so I didn't know what they did. So I made it up, and it ended up being its own kind of unique form of a comedian. But I was painting all the time, and I've never stopped. So I did. Anyway, Vic Reeves ended up on the TV, and various other characters and things that I was playing. But I've never stopped painting, and I kind of just thought, when I got to about 60, I thought, I'm really just happy in my studio painting. So I thought, I'm just going to do that from now on. And that's what I've been doing, and mainly painting birds, because that's what I did when I was a kid. I used to just paint birds, and I went back to doing that, and it became very popular. So it's a full-time job, and now I've got a show on Sky Arts which I'm doing with my wife Nancy, and it's called Painting Birds with Jim and Nancy Moir. So it's kind of a bit of a full circle. Speed sketching started on a Saturday night in my kitchen, and we were playing music, and I said to Nancy, why don't you put on this Roxy Music record? I think it was Virginia playing it, and I said, and I'll see if I can sketch in charcoal Roxy Music within the time that it took for the record to play, which was about, I think, 3 minutes 25 seconds, I'm going to guess. It's something like that. And I did it, and I thought, this is quite good fun. And this was on the Saturday night, so on the Sunday and Monday, I went into the record shop in Deal. I said, this is quite a good idea. Why don't we do this? I'll do some speed sketching. People can bring in their records, and I will sketch their record cover or whatever to the time that it takes for the record to play. So that was started on the Saturday, and we got it organised to happen on the Thursday. So it was a pretty quick turnover. And I said, people come in, put 100 quid into the RNLI bucket, and they get a sketch of their record. And it really worked well. And it was such a hot June day. It was absolutely scorching. I was in the record shop, and I was sketching with charcoal and sweating and constantly rubbing my face. And so just, after about half an hour, I looked like I was in a mine. I was like a coal miner. It was quite an exciting and invigorating evening. So I just did it for about an hour and a half and raised quite a bit of money for the RNLI. And it worked so well, I did it again, and I'm probably due to do another one. Well, I thought the RNLI immediately, because I live in a village in Kent, but we've got a place right by the sea in Deal here, and I'm always passing, and I see the RNLI boat all the time, see it out on the sea, and I've always spent a lot of my life in the sea, and I really liked, rough sea, but I knew its perils, so I learnt it quite early on, and then I started canoeing on, white water canoeing in rivers, not on the sea, but I've also spent a lot of my time in water, and I did own a boat once, but I never really got out into any rough seas, so I just thought it kind of fitted in, and it felt right to donate to the RNLI. Well, I did this little painting. It was just a gift, really. I think it was the last boat that came out. It's an all-weather boat, isn't it? So it's just a postcard-sized painting, and I gave it to, I donated it to the station here at Walmer about 4 years ago, maybe, and I haven't seen it since, and I really like it. I think it kind of gives the impression that there's a lifeboat out in some fairly rough weather, and I've been told it's the Rother class, and it's it's the last one of a breed, and there it is, a little painting that I did for him. I just did it because I don't know, I wanted to paint a lifeboat, so I did it, and I thought I'll donate it and hang it on the wall. It's sort of inspired me to go and do another one. So I'll do another one and take it down to Penzance, and then I'll donate that one to the RNLI down there. Now I'll sell it and then donate the money. How about that? And the picture. Why not?
Hello, this is Ruth Jones. You've been listening to the RNLI's 200 Voices collection. To hear more remarkable stories, head to rnli.org/200voices or subscribe to RNLI wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening.
200 Voices is produced for the RNLI by Adventurous Audio Limited.
My name's Joanna Scanlan, and I've been talking to the RNLI as part of their 200 Voices collection. We didn't ever go abroad when we were kids for holidays. My grandparents had a house on Anglesey, and we spent all our summer holidays with my grandparents. They were very keen on boating. They had a couple of boats themselves, but we used to go down to Treator Bay and look at the RNLI boat coming out of the station with great excitement. And we watched many rescues take place with a combination of the RNLI, the air rescue, and a lot of other Coast Guard activities, because there was always something very dramatic happening at sea. I guess these days you'd learn to swim in a swimming pool, but then it was we were in the sea, and I was always informed by grown-ups around me that you had to be very careful about swimming in the sea. I found that as I got older, my bravery got bigger. I was prepared to take more risk, but at the same time my knowledge about how to avoid real problems grew. And I think that is down to the RNLI kind of communication. So around those stations and talking to those lifeguards on the beach, they will give you advice. They will say, don't go out in that kind of day with an offshore wind or with whatever it might be. Do go out in this place. That bit of the beach is okay. That bit of the beach isn't okay. And I think that it's that communication, the ability to have, I just love chatting to, when you go to any of the stations and just have a chat with local volunteers, they know the water and they can advise you. I think the local knowledge is the most important thing when you're doing any kind of sea activity whatsoever, whether it's boating, stand-up paddleboarding, swimming. You just need that local knowledge, because no bit of water is easy for me to read. I can't read it, but other people can, and I need their help. So I was born in West Kirby, and there's a fantastic lifeboat station in Hoylake and a little one at West Kirby as well. Now, they often have to go out across the sands to Hilborough Island and the whole area around there, because people get stuck in the sands and the mud. And actually I made a TV show about that. Puppy Love is a series that's set in and around West Kirby and the Wirral, Hoylake and Heswell, places like that. And it's about a dog trainer who lives on the top of the hill, and a number of rather sort of smarter people who live down in the town. And the Wirral is sort of known to be a bit posh in its way. But it's an extraordinary place because you're surrounded by this very shallow water, which with tides that just come in and out extremely quickly and constantly changing mud, I guess you call them sandbanks, and mud pools that are underneath the water that which can never really be predicted upon. You just don't know what's going to be happening out there. So the characters in our story end up in a situation where they have to get rescued by the RNLI. And my character that I played in Nana V, she's a bit on the fly. She tends to be lives in a caravan, doesn't have any money, and she's trying to sort of scam people really for a bit of cash. But the story in our episode about the RNLI, which was with the Hoylake team, was really about how in the end she just thinks, this money that I've scammed I need to give to the RNLI, actually, because they did the right thing and I didn't. Yeah, it's an interesting question as to why I felt compelled, along with Vicky Pepperdine, who also was born or has family on the Wirral. I think we both felt when we were writing the stories that it was really important to write a story about the RNLI and what they do for a community. Because although it's really only when you need them that you're aware of exactly how many people are involved and what an everyday activity it is. People are going into those stations, volunteers are going into those stations, every day of the week to keep it going. Whereas there might not be a shout, every day of the week. It might be more like once every week or 2 weeks or whatever. In the summer, obviously, a lot more. So I think we both felt compelled to write about what part the RNLI play in our community, particularly if you live near water and the sea, particularly in the British Isles, because it's invisible until it's visible. And that was something that we wanted to talk about. And also to talk about donating. We wanted to write a story where somebody started off being a little bit complacent and a little bit sort of bit all about me-ish, and then came around to seeing that it was actually very important to be selfless and to make a donation ultimately to the RNLI instead of pocketing that particular bit of money and just taking it home for yourself. One of the reasons that we were writing our story was because I think people make assumptions about the RNLI being a bit like the police or the ambulance service, or something that's already paid for by the government. That it's obviously, if you need it, then obviously the government would pay for it. That's not the case. The RNLI is a voluntary organisation and it needs funds from ordinary members of the public, as well as the bravery and activities of people who actually volunteer on the boats. So we wanted to tell a story where that became very evident, that, oh, hang on, there isn't anybody to help me unless I contribute to the source. And so learning about how important the RNLI is to a seaside community, and then learning about how we all have a responsibility, really, to try to keep that organisation in tip-top condition, because without it, we're all really going to be in big trouble. The RNLI has had an impact on my life because it has enabled me to get out into the water with some certainty that, firstly, I can take advice prior to going, but secondly, if something did go wrong, there is somebody there to help me. And that's enabled me to be much, much braver. I mean, I have done a huge amount of swimming around the British Isles, Scotland, the Hebrides, Scilly Isles, lots of other places. Big, long swims. Now, without the RNLI there in the background, that's not the kind of activity that I would dare undertake. And even with my own boat support team or whatever, I think it wouldn't be something I'd feel confident or comfortable with, because the RNLI and all the organisations that partner with the RNLI in an emergency make it possible for us to enjoy, as much as anything else, enjoy the wonderful nature that we have and sea life that we have around the British Isles. And to me that feels like, I wouldn't call myself a mermaid, but I'm not far off, and that I feel much more comfortable in water than I do on land. So it's lovely to know that there's somebody there taking care of that.
Hello, it's Mark Pusey here. I'm crew at Chiswick on the Thames. If you want to hear more stories from the RNLI's 200 Voices collection, then head to rnli.org/200voices, or subscribe to the RNLI wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening.
"200 Voices" is an adventurous audio limited production for the RNLI.
First thing to say, I love the sea. It's my absolute passion. I'm sitting here watching the tide coming in, and it fascinates me. It brings me joy to my life, and actually the kind of seas I really like, I wouldn't get in them, are kind of February storms in North Cornwall. You know, watching the waves, the power of it, I just find the whole thing mesmerising. Hello, I'm Louise Minchin. I'm a former presenter of BBC Breakfast, and most of all right now, I'm a passionate open water swimmer. I think my relationship started when I was born in Hong Kong, and I don't remember being there, but I lived there till I was about 4.5. But I did learn to swim very, very young in the water there, which was presumably lovely and warm. And the joke in my family is that I could sort of swim before I could walk. So swimming's always been in my life. I've always loved it, and I continue to love it, and have never stopped. You know, I've always swum, and whenever there's a pool or the sea or whatever it is, it's one of my biggest passions in life is to get in and swim. The most recent thing I've done swimming is I've just swum from Alcatraz. So I've gone from normal swimming like most people try, I guess, in swimming pools to doing what I would call open water adventure swimming. And the first thing to say about that is safety is number one, because you don't jump off a ferry near Alcatraz and try and attempt swimming across those straits with very fast tides unless you're with a massive safety team. So I came back from Hong Kong, and then I started swimming here in Reading, actually. I used to swim near there in a place called Wokingham, and went to lessons. I never had a lesson to learn to swim. My dad taught me how to swim. Actually, and I didn't even have lessons then. I just went straight into swimming races, and I remember very clearly, because I loved it, was quite fast. My first race that I did, I came in the top 3, and it was breaststroke, but I got disqualified because my kick was actually an illegal kick. But of course, I'd never had a lesson, so I didn't know. I was absolutely mortified. Anyway, went and sort of cured my illegal kick. I have no idea what I was doing. And swam competitively for a long time, till I was about 15. And again, just loved the competition, loved being in the water, loved every single stroke. I used to swim for my school. I never kind of did it beyond that, because I think what happened was I was good and I really loved it. But when I was about 15, and this is one of my biggest regrets of my life actually, is I realised I used to swim every single day, every day. And this is a point in your life when you're doing your important exams, and I really needed it kind of physically and mentally, but I didn't realise. And I looked in the mirror and I could see that I'd got really muscly shoulders, and I was like, oh, I'm not sure I like those, and I know why it is. It's because of the swimming. And I genuinely stopped swimming swimming competitively for one day to the next. And I just wish I hadn't, because it was such a special thing to me, and it was my time when I wasn't worrying about other stuff or family stuff or exam stuff or academic stuff. And all my message to everybody would be, if swimming is a really beautiful thing for your mind, and to give it up at that stage was absolutely the wrong thing to do. And I'm so glad I've come back to it later in life. I never stopped swimming in Cornwall or when I go to the sea and go and surf, but I didn't stop swimming. I just stopped kind of using it as that crutch which I'd had for years. So it's back, and I absolutely love it, and I swim every week now, and mostly open water swimming. That's what I really like. So in 2012, obviously I'd spent, probably like most people listening to this podcast, most of my summer watching the Olympics, and I absolutely loved it. I was obsessed by it. A friend of mine, producer friend, said, right, we want to do a Christmas challenge for BBC Breakfast. Have you got any ideas? And they'd done sort of cooking challenges before, and I thought that was a bit sort of pedestrian, and we could do something a bit more adventurous. So I said, well, why don't we do something inspired by the Olympics? That's what we've all done all summer. Let's do that. Anyway, she came up with a brilliant idea, which was we were going to go to a velodrome. We were going to cycle against each other on racing bikes in the velodrome with a crowd of 4,000 people. And I was, when she said that, I was like, why did I give her that idea? Why? Because I'd never been to a velodrome. I'd never sat on a racing bike. So the learning curve was so steep, it was ridiculous. Anyway, the 4 of us, Bill Turnbull, Susanna Reid, myself and Charlie State, went in, and we had 1 hour's training, and anybody who's familiar with the velodrome will know that that's pretty steep learning curve, as I said. I got on the bike, I went around the first time, because there's no brakes, there's no gears, if you stop, the wheel, your feet keep turning, absolutely mad. So went around the first time, screamed, because I was terrified. Susanna cried for the whole hour. I think she managed one lap. I've talked about it so many times since. And then we went for a race day, which was the next day or something. And Bill said, I overheard him saying, because Bill and Susanna's time were going to be added together and mine and Charlie's were going to be added together. And so it was the team time. Whoever got the fastest team time was going to win. Charlie went so fast. It was absolutely staggering to watch him. Bill did a really good time and Susanna just got around. So all I needed to do was kind of like not fall off my bike and we were going to win. But I heard Bill say, I can't be beaten by a girl. And I just thought, either I play this safe or I go and beat Bill. Anyway, I didn't play it safe. I absolutely put my foot down, went as hard as I possibly could and beat him by half a second. And it changed my life because I went over that finishing line and I was like, oh my gosh, I hadn't raced since I told you, I was 15 and had given up swimming. I had never done any kind of race between that and I think I was like 44 or 45. And I just thought, wow, this is incredible. I want to race again. But I didn't even know what I wanted to do. Bought myself a racing bike the next week. And then, and again, another friend, she said, oh, I've seen you running, I've seen you cycling. Why don't you try a triathlon? And I was like, triathlon, gosh, that rings a bell. Don't we have some brothers who are really good at it, the Brownlees? And I didn't even know the order the sports went. So it is, of course, swimming, cycling, running. And I did my first triathlon in 2013. And apart from the panic in the swim, absolutely loved it. And once I'd worked out why I'd had a panic in the swim, because I couldn't see anything, took it up with a vengeance and just went on this sort of extraordinary journey, which ended up with me. I didn't end up actually, because I'm still sort of on that journey actually, but the beginning pinnacle of that journey was not the first was doing that first triathlon and then qualifying in my age group to represent the GB team in World and European Championships. I have raised money for the RNLI in the past because some friends of mine were in a very terrible boating accident in Padstow. My daughter's friend, she was in the same class, Emily, died in that accident, as did her father. So it had a huge impact on so many people, and so much so that we did a big bike ride from Padstow, where the accident happened, all the way back to Cornwall. We did it, it's a very long time ago now. It must be about 2015. 100 of us got on our bikes to raise money for the RNLI, also for the air ambulance as well. And we cycled that 500 kilometres and raised, people were incredibly generous, but I think that story just touched people's hearts and, certainly touched my life and so many people's lives. It was shocking. And the point about that is that, there were people from the RNLI on the scene as well very shortly after it happened. So, it was horrific what happened, and it possibly could have been worse. So if it wasn't for, again, people who'd gone out and out of the goodness of their hearts helped save them. Anyway, so we cycled from Padstow to London. I was at the time a terrible cyclist. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. On the first hill out of sort of Harlyn where we left, I nearly gave up. I think the second day was 140 miles. Honestly, it was absolutely horrendous. But we did raise a huge amount of money, and thanks to all those people who donated, and it continues to donate for the RNLI because they do incredible work, and without support, that work wouldn't continue. So right now I'm sitting in the RNLI college, and yesterday I took part in a sea survival course, and they put me in the survival tank, and you've probably seen it on the telly, but it's like a big, deep, and it looks really cold swimming pool where they can make waves and they can have thunder and they can have lightning. We didn't have thunder and lightning yesterday, but what they did was, and it was really, I learned so much from it, is we got dressed as if we were on a fishing boat, in boots, underclothes, enormous great big kind of oilskins over the top. And then we jumped into the waves with all of that, because presumably if you're on a fishing boat, or you could just be out on a sailing boat, perhaps not wearing so many things, maybe not wearing your Wellington boots, and to see how it felt. And so I went in, and very quickly, well, first of all, what surprised me, I didn't go straight to the bottom, because actually in your clothes you've got sort of air pockets and stuff, so that was good. That was really good, because I would have been really scared. Sort of floated for a bit, but very quickly your boots fill up, all my clothes filled up, and I was trying to tread water. I could hardly move. Certainly couldn't swim with all those clothes on, and very quickly got very, very tired. Very tired. But I was all the time being watched by a safety team and a lovely lifeguard who eventually got me out of it. So that was without a life jacket, and then we did it again with a life jacket, which immediately I jumped in the water and it immediately inflated. And you realise very quickly that your chances of survival without a life jacket as opposed to with a life jacket in big waves or any water, because it wasn't very cold yesterday, but it could have been very cold, are dramatically changed. And the most important thing I learnt about it is I never ever want that to happen in real life. I do not want to fall into water in the middle of the sea wearing all my clothes. Without clothes as well, because very quickly you get very tired. What was really striking about here is there's a real sense of camaraderie, which has been lovely to see. And also, again, the scale of it was surrounded by, I can see at least 3 different, well, actually, probably about 10 different life-saving boats / rafts here. The scale of the charity is huge. And then the other thing, I sat and chatted to some of the people who work for it last night, is camaraderie, but also what people do is courageous. It's really something to go out there in raging seas because someone's in trouble. They're courageous and they're brave and they're putting their lives on the line for other people. So, yeah, it's a really inspiring place to be.
Hello, it's Mark Pusey here. I'm crew at Chiswick on the Thames. If you want to hear more stories from the RNLI's 200 Voices collection, then head to rnli.org/200 voices, or subscribe to the RNLI wherever you get your podcasts. Thank you for listening.
200 Voices is produced for the RNLI by Adventurous Audio Limited.